How's everyone doing out there this morning? Yeah. See, this happened last year when I spoke at the Payroll kind of thing. I did that and I got the same kind of, very limp kind of response. How are you guys doing? Okay, that's still terrible, but it's an up. So we'll work with that. I'm here to talk to you about the fact that it's time to become a mighty communicator. And we're going to have a bit of fun. This is pretty easy, but I was here last year and I spoke about the art of influence. Who here was in the room when I spoke last year? So a few of you are in the room and you invited me back. What is wrong with you people? Didn't you learn your lesson last year? It is wonderful to be back, and this is a topic that I'm very, very excited to talk about, the whole concept of communication. And it's such a mighty topic, and I find that it's one of those areas that for me, this morning I think I've met 10 different people and just had a quiet chat to them and found out some extraordinary stuff. For example, Mike, if you don't mind me sharing, just saying that you grew up in a monastery. You find that out just simply because we had a little conversation, we communicated. And it's one of those things that is particularly challenging in the world where perhaps we're not as good at communicating as we always have been. Now, I'm also going to say it's going to get weird today, okay? Like first presentation at a payroll conference, it's important that it gets weird in there somewhere. So I'm going to ask you to play along with a couple of little bits and pieces, and I will do my utmost to make sure that it is fun and there are no tears, except probably mine. Before we go too far into this communication craziness, I will just very briefly tell you a little bit about who I am and what I do and why it is that I'm standing here in front of you. And as Mike said very kindly, yes, I'm an author, but my world started many, many years ago for me. I grew up as an orphan, and my mother actually left my sister and I. So I was 6 months old, and my sister was 18 months old. And my mother left us with an old lady who used to live up the road, and who looked like Mrs. Doubtfire, actually. And which is all kind of nice, really, isn't it? Sounds kind of nice, but unfortunately it was the beginning of a fairly unusual childhood. And one of those childhoods that people don't really understand, but it was just kind of complicated. And things like I used to sleep outside on a mattress. I never slept inside the house. And yet we had a dog, and it always slept inside the house. I never understood that kind of stuff. But when you have that unusual childhood, your outlook on life is always a little bit different. Anyway, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about that. I've got a few stories that I will share along the way, which is around that kind of thing. But like many people, I've done a lot of different things in my world, and everything from selling encyclopedias door to door in Tasmania. So I like to say that I single-handedly educated Tasmania, is my standard kind of joke there. And I worked in exploration. I used to work in the Great Sandy Desert in Western Australia, and I used to teach people first aid and survival techniques. And most of those people were basically bikies. So we used to run our training classes in like public bars of hotels, and they would drink about 20 schooners of beer in a 1-hour training session. So I thought it would have been a lot easier just to kind of get the tattoos on their arm, like if you get bitten by a snake, do this. If you get lost, stay with your car, do all that kind of stuff. But what really changed my little world was I bought my first business when I was 18. I bought a dive shop in Sydney, at Asquith of all places, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with. I like the idea of buying a dive shop which was 30 kilometres from the ocean. I kind of figured that was a good business move. Sea level would rise eventually. I think of myself as a visionary. And of course that didn't happen fast enough. But I bought a business, I had no idea how to do business, and that was a disaster, then it was fantastic, then it was a disaster, then it was fantastic. The way that business tends to be. I learned a great deal of stuff about it. But my world really changed when I moved to Cairns as a commercial diver many, many years ago, and I was putting in a pontoon on the Great Barrier Reef, and I got decompression sickness, which is nitrogen bubbles in the brain. And that stopped me from diving and got me to work in the world of sales and marketing. As a sales and marketing guy, had my own little business eventually, and one day I wrote a book. This is a very abbreviated version because I want to talk about communication more than my story. I wrote a book called 101 Ways to Market Your Business. And it was really, really interesting at the time. I wrote a book because I really wanted to help small business owners. I wrote a book because I saw the same problems that people were experiencing day to day. And it was an interesting little thing that I noticed as well. When I first had the idea to write a book, I went out to many people in my little industry who were in marketing. I said to them, I've got these ideas to write a book. What do you think? And I was really surprised that most of them came back to me and said something along the lines of, Andrew, you're a really nice bloke and all, but who the hell are you to write a book? And of course, sometimes we have that in life, right? There's those people who tell us and take great joy in telling us the things we can't do. So I ignored that, wrote the book, got it published, fortunately, by a big publishing company, and then I took great joy in sending everyone who said I couldn't do it or shouldn't do it a copy of the book. And because that's the kind of guy I am. And then it was interesting, most of them read it and came back to me and said this one line, "Geez, Andrew, I could have written that." Interesting though, because my response was, "Yeah, but you didn't." And isn't that a message in life? Anyway, I went on and have been very fortunate. I've written a whole pile of other books, and as Mike had kindly said, they're sold in 60 countries around the world on different things. And a shameless promotion for my latest book. I don't know how that slide got in there, Tracy. It's just shameless promotion. And of course, I speak all around the world, do different things on different topics, and I've got clients all over the place. And you know, you tend to assume that when people do that stuff, they say they've got all the answers. Of course, it's not like that. I just would say, though, a couple of little things about having your books published around the world. My books are published in Nigeria. And I had a taxi driver this morning who actually had read one of my books in Nigeria. And well, that's got to be the first time that has happened. So I like to think I'm actually the first Australian to do a Nigerian scam, is my line on that one. I know, see, this will go much easier if you laugh at my bad jokes. It'll be much, much easier on you. But of course, I don't have all the answers, regardless for the companies that I work for. But what I do have is a really interesting take and a really interesting perspective, I feel, on what is happening around the world. What are the issues in business? What are the trends? What are the challenges? What are the areas that we need to focus on, to work on? And I talk a lot about what is happening in the world of technology, all kinds of crazy stuff. But one of the really big topics that there's a lot of discussion around at the moment is communication. And communication for us as human beings has had some radical transformation in the last 10 years. And not everyone is on board with it. It's getting hard to communicate. I know, I get all the emails from the grammar Nazis that tell me on page 743 of one of my books, I've used an S instead of a Z. And they take great joy in doing that. But the world of communication is changing, and I want to share some ideas around that today. My fascination with communication came very early in my life. I learned that communication, the better I was at communicating, the better I was at controlling my situation, my life. And because I had an unusual upbringing, there was a lot of violence, there was a lot of people in my childhood who weren't very nice people, I learned to communicate. I learned to manage them through communication. I didn't realise though at the time that I was doing that, but I had an experience when I was 18 that really taught me a great deal about the extraordinary nature of communication, and it fascinated me with it ever since. I was teaching people how to scuba dive at this dive shop, and one day Ku-ring-gai College of Advanced Education came to me and said, "We've got 20 deaf people that want to learn how to dive. Can you teach them?" And I went, "Sure, absolutely. Why not, as long as they pass the medical?" So in the classroom, I'm talking 100 miles an hour, and I have a sign language translator who's talking as well. By the end of 4 days, her fingers were kind of nubs because I talk pretty fast. When we teach people how to dive, we use sign language underwater. So these are the signals. Everyone do this for me. That means something's wrong. Okay, that's just wrong. Okay, this is up. Everyone do that. This is down. Okay, this is okay. Do that. This is a dead spider. Some of you who aren't doing it, I don't like that. Okay, this is shark. Everyone likes that. This is really big shark. Okay? So as soon as we went to Shelley Beach at Manly, and we didn't go in the pool, we went straight in the ocean, on that first dive that we went on with these 20 extraordinary people, the wonder in their eyes was amazing. But what was really extraordinary was the fact that as soon as we put our heads underwater, I knew 7 sign language signals. Okay? These guys held a full-blown conversation underwater. And I was the guy with the disability. Oh, I just kept doing this, you know. That was it. That was the extent. They go, "Oh, well, you know, it's a bit cold under here. There's a red fish over." And I'm going, "Let's move this along." And it was an extraordinary situation to be the person on the other side of that fence. And I think that sometimes, you know, that certainly ignited my passion for communication of all kinds. But it also ignited this great sense of empathy in people to understand one of the keys of being a really wonderful communicator and a mighty communicator is you have to be empathetic about the others. And we've got to be in those situations where everything changes. It's like walking down the street. If you're a white person and walking down the street where everyone else is black and you're not understanding what it feels like to be a minority, you know, they're the fundamental situations that change us and that are good for us. But communication is an extraordinary thing in many ways. So why do you need to be a mighty communicator? Some of you are sitting there going, yeah, I'm a great communicator, or I don't really care. Well, there's a few very important reasons. Number one is because communication skills are becoming greatly sought after because people are pretty much crap at communicating. We're communicating a lot, but we're not really saying stuff. We're not even able to be present these days. We've lost the art of being fully engaged and fully present with someone. So people, employers, are starting to recognise the value of this. Communication skills are being highly sought after. Number two, great communicators get more opportunities directed their way. And this is very true. You know, again, there's a pile of research to support this. If you're a great presenter within your organisation, you will get promoted far faster than if you're not. And of course, great communicators are more likely to be promoted. And even this morning, I read something in the Financial Review, which I'll bring up because it'll make me look clever. Only 1 in 10 people ask for a pay rise. Okay, who are the 10% of people who ask for pay rises? Okay, good. Nice, thank you for coming along. The 10%, asking for a pay rise is not as simple as it sounds. It requires a strategic approach, an understanding of the link between productivity and remuneration, and being able to articulate the value you add. You need to be able to communicate. So if you want a better job, you want to make more money, you've got to learn to actually be a better communicator. Okay, but there's another reason, and this is the biggest reason of all, and it stems from a book that made me realise this. A little while ago, I came across this book, and it's called No Mercy. And it's written by these two extraordinary ladies who have gone back and they've researched these disasters that have happened over the years. And it's generally a disaster like a ship has sunk, it's ended up on a rock, and there's 50 people there, and, you know, it's turned ugly. You know within a few minutes that there's no one coming, there's not going to be anyone coming to rescue us, things get bad. Human nature has this funny little quirk that within a matter of minutes, let's say all of us are kind of on a little desert island type thing, the boat sunk, the love boat has sunk, things have turned bad. What happens in a very short amount of time is that we soon realise that who are the strongest and who are the weakest out of the groups. And generally, groups are formed, but in a group, you have a strongest person, they know they're the strongest person, and you have a weakest person, and they know they're the weakest person. And weakest doesn't mean just physically, just whatever it kind of defines. Human nature, we do that. But then, let's say we're on this little island in a group, all of a sudden there's not a lot of food, and we look around and kind of go, So the weakest kind of realises that this is not going to look good. Bad things happen to the weakest person at night. And generally we get up the next morning and, you know, there's a lot of food around all of a sudden and we need another weakest person. Okay, so this is what happens in survival situations. And of course, if you are the weakest, you know you're the weakest, so you stop sleeping because you know that bad things happen at night. And so you will end up, of course, getting eaten sooner than that. So all of this kind of stuff is important. But the reality is that the weakest is never the worst communicator. The better you are as a communicator, the less likely you are to be the person that gets eaten. So this presentation may actually save your life, is the bottom line here. Oh no, thank you. Okay, I'd like to consider myself a humanitarian. So you need to listen because your life may depend on it. And you laugh. I can think in 6 months' time, you're freaking on a cruise, the boat sinks, there's 50 of you on a rock, you're going to think back to this presentation. So pay attention or take some Enos will be my other advice. Okay, I've got 7 little ways that I think we can be a mighty communicator. As I said, I've been a student of communicating with writing, with speaking, with just about everything over the years. And that's what I want to share with you. And the first part about this for me is curiosity. And it's about the importance of being curious as a communicator, but also just as a human being. Curiosity is this wonderful attribute that unfortunately most of us are perhaps struggling a little bit to be curious because we're too flaming busy. You know, we don't have the time to be curious, yet we live in a world where we have, you know, so much opportunity to find answers, to have our curiosity kind of, I guess, you know, fed as much as we want to. But we need to be curious about life. We need to be curious about people. And because we're not really communicating and having as many conversations as we want, we miss many opportunities. I could have walked up to Mike, shaken his hand and said, mate, nice to meet you, love what you do, rah, 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 and kind of walked away. Instead, within a minute, Mike knows about me, we had a 10, 15-minute conversation where I know so much about you that most people wouldn't know, I imagine, simply because I was really curious and interested, and Mike was kind enough to share, you know. Curiosity is a very powerful thing, and it's a mindset that we have to teach ourselves how to be curious, okay? And that's what makes us interesting. That's what makes us great conversationalists. That's what makes us worldly. But it is something that doesn't happen by itself. Curiosity is easy. It's easy to become a lazy kind of person around curiosity, okay? When we're curious, we also become influential because we have greater knowledge about greater things. And I've already said, the better communicator you are, the more sought after you are in many different ways. So I am curious about everything. And just to show you an example of how things are different when you're curious and how you look at the world, these are just a couple of things that I just picked up offline in the last few days. In Africa, for example, they have a problem with elephants eating crops. This is in Kenya. So rather than put up some kind of electric fence or do something like that, these smart people have put up a fence made of bees because elephants are big scaredy cats and they're afraid of mice and bees. You go, what a clever idea that is. What a clever and interesting kind of thing. I think it's clever and interesting. In Sweden now, you can actually, the homeless people in Sweden have mobile FPOS machines on them. So you can use a credit card to give them money. Now, I'm not going to kind of debate the morality of that and all of the complexity around that, but is that not cool or what? Because our biggest reason not to give people money would be, oh, I haven't got any money on me. Oh, no, that argument doesn't work. Look at the smile on her face. Okay? We all have the odd bad relationship. It's terrible and awkward to break up. Now you can outsource it. This is an Australian company called Sorry, It's Over. Now, for $50, they'll send an SMS on behalf of you to break up with your other half, which I think is pretty reasonable. But they also have a sliding scale. So if you want, look, I can't really do an SMS breakup. It's really, I better do a face-to-face one, yeah. So I'll pay someone to go and do a face-to-face breakup for me, which I think, again, is very responsible of us. But sorry, it's over. What a great idea for a business. This one, another one that I came across out of America. First home buyers, the biggest issue that people have is getting the deposit together. People can't find 100 grand laying around. Or if you're in Sydney, 500 grand for your deposit. But this startup, what they're doing now is they're saying, okay, we will give you the deposit for your house if you give us one room in your house for 3 years that we can rent out on Airbnb. How clever is that? Anyone who thinks things like Airbnb that don't have influence, this is the new world. How cool is that? You want to buy a house? They will give you the money. I look at that and go, isn't that a clever thing? What could we learn from that? Curiosity. In Sweden, there's a stretch of road where the Swedish drivers continually speed. And people are kind of going, oh, well, what do we do? So they were getting fined with these cameras, but no one seemed to care because for whatever reason, they'd like to speed on that stretch of road. So what they did, they started a lottery and they turned around and said, everyone who speeds and gets fined, what we do is we take all of those fines and we give them to the people who don't speed as a reward for not speeding. So people didn't care about getting fined by the government and paying a fine, but they hated the fact of giving it to other drivers who weren't speeding, and the speeding rate dropped by 70%. I think that's just fabulous on so many ways. New winter garments that are coming out now, where you could be in this auditorium, and you know what it's like in these places, they get hot, they get cold, rah, rah. You just touch your sleeve and you warm up, little warming panels. How fabulous would that be? And it'd be so much better for us men because we wouldn't have to hear you ladies going all the time how freaking cold it is. This one, AI, you just take a photo of your food that you've got, put it out on the bench, and it will come back to you, an app, and tell you how many types of meals you can make from your weird ingredients in the bottom of your fridge. Okay? And this one is my absolute not a favourite recent realisation. It says in Rome. So let's say you're in Rome, and you go, you know what? I think I need an exorcism. You open your phone, and a little app comes up, which is priest on a scooter. And there's a little map, and it'll tell you how many priests on scooters are in your area right now. And, you know, they're moving around and go, well, that one's close. So it'll be 7 minutes before your priest on a scooter will arrive. So you've got time to get the holy water and all that stuff ready. The priest will come. He will do whatever absolution needs to be done, and whatever service you need will be done. It's all the credit card. It's all done kind of like Uber, right? And then when the priest goes, a little panel comes up on your phone and you've got to give them an angel wing rating. How many angel wings do you rate your priest? So none of this has anything to do with what we're talking about today, apart from the wonderful fact, the power of curiosity. And I spend 2 hours a day. Okay, I've got to get a puppy, right? But I spend 2 hours a day researching and looking at this kind of stuff, seeing this stuff because I can use it in presentations, because I can use it when I'm writing, because I can talk about it, because it is interesting and it makes me interesting, I hope. Please get back in touch with your own curiosity. You know, it is one of the things that we are forgetting about, and we have so many wonderful places where we can have our curiosity satiated, if that's the right word. So that's one. Number two, empathy. As a great communicator, as I said before, empathy is one of those keys that we need to do. It means we need to be able to put ourselves in the shoes of others. And, you know, I wrote an entire book about empathy, to be honest, because for me, it's something that's helped me get through my life, is to learn how to be empathetic to others, to learn in every situation where I need to communicate, I stop and my first thought is to, you know, is to put myself in their shoes. You know, I had the fortune of working with Richard Branson, and I've just name dropped there, and I remember that, you know, I had all these really intelligent questions that I was going to ask him. And of course, then I've met him, shook his hand, and you know, I couldn't say any of it because I turned into a, you know, I lost it. And he asked me all these wonderful questions about what do I do and how do I do it? Tell me how you sell your books, how do you do all this kind of stuff? And of course, my answers were and went, well, that went really, really well, wasn't it? But I was so impressed at how he had done his homework and he was asking me and was genuinely interested. I thought, you know, again, I see great people, great communicators are very, very good at putting themselves in the shoes of others, okay? And it is, again, another lost skill because we're kind of focused inwards. We're focused, it's all about me. It's not actually focused about the person in front of us. If you want to be a great communicator, you've got to consciously reprogram that. And I look at empathy as one of the most powerful tools for actually putting ourselves in a different state of mind when it comes to others. And I'm going to use an example here, which is it's a very strong one, but it's maybe even two examples. But I mentioned before that I was an orphan and my parents left myself and my sister when we were only little babies. And I kind of grew up with that, you know, and you kind of go, well, how could she have left me? I would have been a gorgeous baby, you know, a little bit hairy, but, you know, and I kind of carried that with me and intellectually kind of said, oh, I dealt with that because I'd never met my mother and didn't really know the circumstances why she left. And because I was also brought up in a situation that was filled with violence and uncertainty and every kind of abuse imaginable, you know, you have a little bit of resentment towards someone. You know, you kind of go, yeah, you know, how could she have done that? And I did a program for a day many years ago now, and I remember the lady running this said to me, Andrew, who had the biggest impact on you in your life? And without even really thinking about it, I said, my mother. Now, I couldn't pick her out of a lineup. I wouldn't know if she was sitting next to me, you know, on a plane or something like that. I was quite surprised that that was my answer. And she, you know, we started talking. So she said, tell me a bit about it. And so I told her that my mother had left. And she said, okay, well, let's just think about things a little bit from your mother's perspective. So my mother was 17 years old and she had 2 children. She was not married. She was in a relationship with an Italian, and in the 60s, Italians and English people, that was all weird. I don't know what that was all about. She'd been kicked out by her family, so her family had ostracized her, so she was alone, a 17-year-old little girl. And 3 doors up from their house was Mrs. Doubtfire. This beautiful granny, you kind of look nice, a little dog, fluffy hair, makeup, all that kind of stuff. And she left us with that lady and disappeared. Now, it's very easy to look at that as an act of neglect, abuse, abandonment. This lady said, well, maybe what she did was an act of love. Maybe what she did was the most incredible loving act that you could possibly imagine. And you know what? It actually doesn't matter whether it's right or wrong. It doesn't really matter, the answer, but it's a better story. It's a better perspective because all of a sudden, I put myself in the shoes of my mother and I say to myself, what would I have done if I was in that situation? How would I have handled it? You know, Mr. Black and White. And I realised, you know, that was the beginning of my journey. You know, for me, there was this little grey area in life and everything was black and white. And all I realise now at the age of 51 is it's just nothing but grey. a little bit of black and a little bit of white on the ends. You know, empathy, when we really, truly put ourselves, and that's a big example. Another example I'll use is one day I was, when in this craziness of my life, my sister was abducted by this crazy lady, another crazy lady, who broke into our house and literally dragged my sister out. And on the way out, I went to try and grab my sister. I was about 5, I think, maybe 6. And this lady turned around and punched me in the face and then grabbed me. And she literally dragged us away from this house. She'd had some kind of meltdown. And of course, we ended up in a house in Perth where we were living in the window. And this lady's got a knife to my throat. And the police are out the front, and there's a whole don't hurt the children kind of thing going on the megaphone, fire engines and ambulances. And it was one of those hostage situations. And this lady was sobbing. She was naked, which I didn't really understand. You know, that was a part that I found perplexing, not from any sexual way, but I'd never actually seen a naked lady before. And it was just a weird to add to the knife against the throat. That's kind of fine. I could deal with that. But why hasn't she got any freaking clothes on? It's cold, you know? I don't understand. But even though I hadn't really thought about that, because in my childhood, that was really just a Tuesday afternoon, okay? But when I wrote a book about this, and about my kind of upbringing and all that kind of stuff, and I hadn't thought about that situation for many years, but when I stopped and thought about it then, you know, I wasn't angry. There was no bitterness. I felt sorry for her. You know, obviously she had stuff going, I don't know what she had going on in her life. I was just a little kid. But obviously someone doesn't do that and wig out like that unless there's some major reason behind it. And I think again, and it all ended up okay. You know, she didn't kill the children, obviously, and she got taken away and whatever happened. I don't even really know what happened. But again, the power of empathy, just even at a simpler level of stopping and putting ourselves in the shoes of the person in front of us is such an extraordinary thing to do. And yet we've kind of got bad at doing that. We kind of don't take the time. We don't make the effort. We're not as interested in others as we can. But when you do it, it is extraordinary what changes in your life. Many of us carry hurts from 50, 60, 70 years ago that seriously, let them freaking go. All we become is that story that holds us in place that no longer serves us. We've got to let that stuff go. Live your life in the shoes of others. I also remember this from a business perspective point of view that I used to, in my little company in Cairns, I used to have this guy that used to come in and just be an intercity courier. And so in Cairns, he rode a horse. And thank you for those laughing at that. The rest of you, that was a joke. But the reality of it was, this guy was Courier John. And we knew Courier John because he'd hung in the office all the time. We got to know him really, you know, a little bit. But I saw that guy more than I saw my wife at the time, just because I was always working. And I always remember that Courier John was his face, but all I knew really was his name. And then one day, I had an appointment cancelled. Courier John happened to be in there, and I said, right, I want to have a coffee right now. And he kind of looked at me and thought he was in trouble. We went out and had a cup of coffee. And I said, John, I see you every day 12 times, but I know nothing about you. And I've seen you every day 12 times for the last 3 years. And so, who are you? Who the hell are you? And he told me his story. He used to be in logistics in Sydney, had a heart attack at a very young age, like he was in his 40s, and married, and his wife was a senior in the government services. And he said, we moved to Cairns. We just wanted to have I just want to pick my kids up. I want to have a really easy job, and I just want to, be able to go and pick up the kids at 3 o'clock and, enjoy life, make dinner and do that. And that's my thing. And it was really just a nice conversation. And our friendship really grew from that. Anyway, I didn't really think much about it after we had the coffee. It was just nice. I had a connection. But my business got really, really busy. And things just got crazy. But what I noticed was when I started to go back through the client sheets and see where people had come from, the interesting thing was they'd all been referred by Courier John. He'd become my greatest sales rep. Because he'd walk into offices, all he did was go into businesses every day, and he'd be going, wow, gee, this place looks run down. You guys need some new branding. You should go and see Andrew and the team at the marketing professionals. Or, well, there's no one in your restaurant. You need to see Andrew and get some more customers in here. So he became a one-man army simply because I stopped and had a cup of coffee with him. He hadn't referred a soul before then. But simply because I'd taken the time, and very genuinely taken the time to have a chat to him, he became my greatest asset. The day he resigned from his company, I was in tears. You can't leave. I offered him a job for $200,000 a year, and he wouldn't take it. I said, just go and talk to people. That's all I want you to do. Anyway, empathy is one of those kind of things. Number 3 is this concept of being present. And this to me is probably the key to it all. And that's being present when we're actually with people. And it seems like a really hard thing to do because, yeah, we live in a world full of distractions. I sit in a meeting, if my friends ring me now, or if I ring them and they're distracted on the phone, I hang up. I don't have a distracted conversation with people because I hate it. They hate it when I do that, I might add as well, which kind of gives me a lot of enjoyment. But to me, it's about, giving people your full attention. And I think that we don't do it enough. I sit in meetings all the time and it's people are just on their phones. People are looking at their SMSs. They're looking at their emails. They're doing all this kind of stuff. They don't really look. And we have this kind of thing that, we have to be in touch with everyone all the time. I don't think anyone in this room is, going to be called into an ER room, and have to do a brain surgery in the next 15 minutes. I was a marketing guy and I was like that. What is someone going to ring up and say, we need an emergency marketing plan? By 3 o'clock, otherwise someone's going to die. But we have, as we know, and we've all heard about this, and we've all spoken about this little concept of addiction to our devices. But what the thing is, we've lost the ability to be fully present. We are so distracted in so many ways. And again, just like curiosity, presence is something that I think we need to retrain ourselves. We've got to relearn how to be fully present in an environment. And for me, it's this concept of the gift of presence is what this is all about. Because when you actually learn or relearn how to be fully present, and what I mean by that, if you meet someone, and anyone who knows me knows, if I stop and I'm talking to you, you have my undivided, absolute attention. I don't do distracted attention. And I'm amazed at how many people really comment on that. I have a reputation for that. And I will say, just let me do this first and then I'll talk to you, because we're constantly spending our day in a distracted way, half communicating with a whole pile of people. And to be honest, it just does not work. My strategy is simple. Make every single connection, interaction that I have count. And I've had to relearn to do that because I get 400 or 500 emails a day. I do work in 20 countries. I'm a busy guy. But whether I'm sitting on a plane next to someone, whether I'm in an Uber, I try to make every interaction. This morning, again, I know all about Nigerian life because I took the time to make that interaction with my taxi driver meaningful. Because that, to me, is what life is about. I could have sat there and, checked out the latest friggin' photo on Facebook, and I do that as well. But when I'm with someone like that, I know I left that interaction and we both had a really nice experience. I know the guy's going home. I know his sister's name. Say hello for me. Buy some of my books while you're over there. Whatever it might be. But this is it. And we only have so many of these interactions in our life. So we don't want to waste them. And again, I know that can sound like the back of a Hallmark card or the inside of a Hallmark card. But I find that the quality of my life is so much better because I engage with people, because I'm interested in people, because I make those interactions meaningful. And I'm surprised at how many people notice that and comment on that. And again, I had to teach myself to do that. So this is my daily, inspired connection mantra. Number 1, be fully present in every interaction, no matter what. Every interaction that I have, my objective is to be fully present, and I've got to work on that. Number 2, I really like to make the other person feel better about themselves. And by that is genuinely, most of the time, is just listening. How often do people really, really listen to you? Not that often. And that's part of it, particularly kids. Number 1 thing that kids want under the age of 10, I read a survey recently, to be heard. Isn't that interesting? Yet by the time they're 17, they've been told no 300,000 times. Number 3, be kind, be gentle with the other person. Whatever the situation is, I've got to have hard conversations with people, but it doesn't mean I'm going to be an arsehole about it, generally. Number 4, do the little things that most people won't when you're connecting, whatever that might be, and consider this your last conversation. You're going to have a last conversation with every single person you know, okay? Whether they die, you die, whatever it might be. And something happens. You've got to make every conversation meaningful, in my view. If you care about people, tell them. If you're unhappy about something, tell them, whatever it might be. But we've got to make our connections and our engagement far more meaningful, okay? The time to be most present with others is when you don't have the time. Because none of us have the time these days. We're all ridiculously busy. We're all kind of crazy. My thing is to try and slow it down. And I'm as busy and crazy as everyone. I understand that. But again, the quality of your life will change with the quality of your communication. So if your life is amazing and perfect in every way, don't change a thing, okay? Because obviously that you're pretty awesome. But if there's any part of your life that you think could be improved, whether it be work, whether it be relationships, whether it be family, whatever, it's going to come back to this. And, the time to be most present is when you don't have the time. Stop multitasking is the bottom line with that one. Okay, stories. You'll probably notice that my presentation is just basically stories. Okay, I just tell lots and lots of stories, and it's kind of nice because people pay me to do that around the world. Stories are powerful, being able to share our stories. But the only way that we tend to share our stories about us is often if someone shows some interest. And I think that every single person in this room has an interesting story. I believe that to be true. And I've yet to meet anyone who doesn't have an interesting story about where they come from in their life. I've met millions of people, though, who say they think they haven't got an interesting story. And I never believe that. It's just you've got to kind of do a bit of gorillas in the mist sometimes to hold out the leaf to try and get them to come out and tell their story as well. But stories are powerful, and we've just rediscovered them, of course, because they haven't been around, they haven't existed for the last 100,000 years in caves and all the rest of it. But of course they have, but in the business world, we're starting to tell stories. I ran not so long ago a 2-day event, which was for CEOs, was to teach CEOs how to tell stories. Because why? The reason and I had 30 or 40 CEOs from some really big companies around Australia, the reason that they wanted to learn to tell stories was because they couldn't just get up in front of a room full of shareholders anymore and point at graphs. And they couldn't just go to the board and give them a report saying what our earnings are going to be or whatever. They had to tell a story. They had to tell more of a story about what was happening in the company. They're becoming real spokespeople for their company. They had to tell the story of the business. And that dwells right down to, if you're in any kind of role these days, one of the greatest ways you can teach others is to share your own stories, share your own experiences, share your own observations. Yet we often don't see value in that kind of stuff. Mighty communicators share stories. And that is, without a doubt, one of the great skills that we have. And ironically, in this section, no, I haven't got any stories to tell you. So, the next one is humility. And humility is a really big point as well. I kind of consider, I became a good speaker and a good writer and a good communicator in my own little head when I stopped trying to be one. And what I really mean by that was when I didn't need my ego to be fed as a communicator. I didn't need people to come up and say, hey, you're a great speaker or you're a great writer. I don't really need any of that kind of stuff anymore. What my objective is to try and help people as a communicator. And I move more from my head down to my heart and communicate from a more heart-based kind of a place. And I think that is a big thing about communication. But we do need to be what I would call brave enough to be authentic when we communicate. Because we kind of hide behind a lot of stuff these days. But this authenticity is coming out in the corporate world, in the entrepreneurial world, everywhere, because we're looking for it, we're craving it. We're much more educated, we're much more in tune with this kind of stuff, and we're looking for authenticity wherever we can. And that's a little bit hard. That's tough for people to kind of come out from behind the professional facade. And it is often about leaving that ego at the door, which is how I kind of look at that. And it's an interesting thing for me when I present, and I present to men or women. If you're an audience full of women, I would dive straight into the heart stuff. Because women are great. Women just get it. They go into this one. You can be open, authentic, vulnerable. It's a wonderful place. You can kind of cut out all the crap. If I've got a room full of men, I'll sit there for a few minutes with your arms crossed, kind of going, what's this fella going to teach us, hey? So I've learnt the way to try and engage with men is I have to tell basically a sports kind of story. Now, I have no interest in sports at all. It's the only area I'm not curious about life in any shape or form. So I have a hotline. I ring a friend of mine. I say, right, I'm presenting in Melbourne to these blokes. Tell me something funny about sports. And he'll have a joke that I will tell to the audience and all the blokes will laugh. And I have no idea what it means. Absolutely none. Generally it's something about Collingwood or whatever it might be. But anyway, and I know that one day he's actually going to catch me out on this thing. I can tell that one day he's going to give me a joke that's going to backfire on me. But the point being, if there is a point to this, is we need to have a little bit of humility, and we need to be able to communicate with humility, whether it's in a working environment, in a personal environment, whatever it is. And that takes a little bit of courage, which actually leads on to my next point. To be a mighty communicator, we need to be brave. And I don't know why we've stopped communicating. Why did we get so scared of opening up to people? People don't even want to kind of connect. I mean, I was in David Jones a little while ago. And there was a lady, it was late in the afternoon, and there was no one around. And I went up to a counter, I can't even remember what I was buying. And the lady behind the counter just looked unbelievably sad. She was an Indian lady, she was quite elderly, and she was just, my heart just ached when I saw her. And I said, "Are you okay?" And she just looked at me and burst into tears, and she said, "No, I'm not." And I went behind the counter and I just gave her a big hug, and she said, I didn't need to ask what the problem was. She didn't need to tell me. It wasn't about that. And she just said, "Thank you. You're the first person that has asked me that today, and today is the worst day of my life." And that was the end of the conversation. Now, I could have just ignored that. I could have just not said anything and just kind of saw it and moved away. But over the years, I've learnt to not do that. I've learnt to not walk away. I've learnt to ask the question when I can see that someone is struggling, to see, and we know, we can pick up on that. We're human beings. We're intrinsically built to see that stuff. We know it, but we don't see it if we're not interested. We don't see it if we don't really care about people. We don't see it if we're not empathetic. We don't see it if we're not looking for it. And that was just a beautiful little interaction with that human being who I'll probably never see again. She'll never see me. And it's not me trying to say, "Wow, I know, awesome." It's nothing like that in the slightest. It's it's the quality of life. And that was a moment that had a profound impact on me. And I'm pretty certain it had a big impact on her as well. And isn't that what we're on the face of the planet for? For more of that kind of stuff. There are so many opportunities that we miss. Who gets in a lift every day and does that? How slow do those floors change? Do it. I was in a lift a little while ago in the Hilton, and I stay in the Hilton often, and it was a top floor or something rather, and I'm coming, and I had a Beach Boys song in my head. And I'm kind of, I don't know which Beach Boys song that was, by the way, just on passing, but it was one of them, okay? I think it was, I wish we could be Californian girls or something. And I had what do they call it, an earworm or something when the song is trapped in your head? And I'm kind of humming away, and I'm the only person in the lift. Anyway, a lady gets in the lift, and I say, "Hey, how you doing?" I always say hello. Half the people answer, half the people don't. Half that don't just kind of move away from you, and kind of, "I hope he doesn't talk to me again. Hope he doesn't talk to me again." I like to walk up to those people and look at them. Rub my head. Anyway, I'm in the lift on one side, she's on the lift on the other side, and I'm and she started humming the song. And we just kind of looked at each other and smiled, and we kind of, "Yeah, it's a good song." "Yeah, we're sure, yeah." Anyway, another guy got in, and we both keep going with this little kind of thing happening. And he joins in. A couple of seconds, he figured out what's happening. He was a young guy. He was jiggy with it. And then another guy kind of get in, and he thinks, "Man, these guys are all crazy." But, I could be the weakest in here. I'll get eaten. Okay, I wish we all could be California. Anyway, we're in this lift. We're having a blast as we're kind of going down. Anyway, a chef walks in on one of the floors. He's got this big tray or something covered over with tea towels and stuff. And he walked into us, and we're all having a blast. He said, "Hey, you guys, do you want some cookies?" So we're at this thing, singing along, eating these cookies. All we needed was for someone to wheel a cappuccino machine in there. I'd still be there. And it was just this random, spontaneous moment that started because I'm a bit of a dick, more than anything else. And I don't care. I don't care. And I look at that, and it's almost become a personal challenge now for me to kind of create those moments. Because I do realise that one day I'm going to stand up on stage and probably drop dead of a heart attack. That's my desired way, probably with a Zimmer frame of some sort when I'm 97. I'll be talking this way to the audience. But for me, it's about making those moments. Whether it be talking to a boss at work, talking to your sibling, talking to your frickin' dog, it doesn't matter. It is about making those moments meaningful. Please don't be afraid of communicating. That's what this is all about. We've lost that thing. We don't want to say, what's going to happen if you say hello to someone? And they kind of turn around. But we've lost a bit of that ability. Now, I'm not saying let's not get weird with them. We don't want a restraining order put on us, but 1 or 2 restraining orders is okay, as far as I'm concerned. For the rest of the day today, I want you guys to do one thing for me. And we're going to practice it now, okay? I told you it was going to get weird. I want you to turn to the person next to you, behind you, in front of you, one at a time, and I want you to look at that person and I want you to give them a sincere compliment. Then you swap over. Okay? As you work. This is the part where you talk. Next person, a sincere compliment. Righto, that's enough. Cut it out. Now, so that's your mission, okay? Today, every time you bump into someone, look them up and down, not in a weird way, okay? And say something sincerely to them. It's a beautiful shirt. I love your earrings. I love your hair. You've got a great smile. Now, gentlemen, in the toilets, we don't do that. Okay, let's just put some parameters, safe zones around that. Do not look at the guy in the urinal next to you and go, hi, I like you. You've got a nice... Okay, that's just wrong. And I'm telling you that from first-hand experience, all right? But try it. Every time you encounter someone today, please give them a compliment. Don't complain if the coffee's cold or this is not... Who cares about that stuff? Let's have a day of meaningful connection. Because that's what this whole freaking trip on this little spinning ball is all about. And what you find with an exercise like that, there are two types of people. There are people that can't give compliments and there are people that can't take compliments. And it's interesting to say, well, which are you? And whatever you are, you can get better at it. If you're not good at taking compliments, just say thank you. It's pretty easy, right? Anyone here got a problem saying thank you? If you're not good at giving compliments, well, just try it. Just say something nice. Just don't be creepy. Okay? It's a moral to the story. And of course, the last part of this, and I'll wrap it up, is the need to be playful. And if you haven't got that from me by now, that's the thing. I mean, I'm not sure. Maybe I may be descending into some form of dementia, which is I'm partially concerned about. But my care factor of people not responding or doing that, I don't really care anymore because I do want to make every interaction meaningful. You know, I do love to have fun when I'm connecting with people, and I look for these ways, and the world is changing. And this is my last story that I'll share with you. I came across this recently. In Seattle, they decriminalised marijuana a few years ago. So to do that, they decided to put on HempFest. Now, it's a pretty... I don't think any of us would have any trouble kind of guessing what the audience would be for HempFest. There's going to be a whole lot of Bob Marley T-shirts, and there's going to be a lot of people very, very hungry there, I would imagine. Okay. So you look at that and go, okay, so how will the police manage that? So I'm from Queensland. So the way that we would manage that is generally we would have a lot of police there and we'd beat up a couple of hippies. Just set the mood, find a few hippies and beat them up. Okay, just it's a token thing. And but the Seattle police did something really, really clever because they didn't want people wandering around the streets of Seattle stoned or driving or whatever. So they gave everyone who went to Seattle HempFest a packet of Doritos. And there's a sticker on the Doritos, which I'll read out. It's a little bit hard to read. But it says, HempFesters, we thought you might be hungry. We also thought that now might be a good time for a refresher on the do's and don'ts of this new law. The don'ts: don't drive while you're high. Don't give, sell or shotgun weed to people under the age of 21. Sage advice. Don't use pot in public. You could be cited, but hey, we'd rather just give you a warning. The do's: do listen to The Dark Side of the Moon at a reasonable volume. Enjoy HempFest. This is the changing world of communication. This is, if the police department in Seattle could do something like this, we can all start to have a lot more fun in what we're doing because it's okay to have fun with our communication. And we're seeing that. I bought a diary the other day at Officeworks, and the inside page is this really quirky, funny, telling me how to use a diary. I know how to use a notebook. I got a pen. I understand this, but this was really quite hilarious, explaining to me all the weird stuff that I could put in there. It's okay to have fun with your communication, and we give you that license today. But even more so, I would hope that you, throughout the day, and you leave here, fall in love with communication a little bit. I have, and I got to say, my world is so much better as a result of that. Everything in my world is so much better. So it's time to become a mighty communicator. Seriously, it is. Okay? We've got our framework: curiosity, empathy, be present, tell great stories, be brave enough to share your story, have some humility. You know, let the ego at the door, don't worry about it. Be brave, and of course, be playful in the way that you communicate. And I think this conscious thinking, aim to be a better communicator, and you will be amazed at what changes. The quality of your relationship, the quality of your work, the quality of your position within your organisation, everything changes when you become a better communicator. And apart from that, we don't want to go through life looking like one of the walking Diaz, which is an intended spelling mistake, of course, in there. It's not really, but the Walking Dead. That was a really flat joke. Didn't really work, did it? That was an insert late last night, and I'm kind of regretting that movement now, that I should have really thought that one through a little bit more. But become a considered communicator. And again, I talk about that whole thing, and like poor old Tracy's listened to my presentations over the last few years, and there was a time that I used to be so stressed out about presenting. Like seriously, I got a stage with a stick up my butt that everything would have to go right, and if the slides were wrong or there's a typo, I'd go outside and kill myself. You can only do that so many times as a speaker, you know, and worry, but I've learned to be relaxed about it, and the most important thing that I do as a communicator is I have a lot of fun. And I love communicating, and I love sharing ideas, and I love sharing stories with people. And I think that hopefully there's a message or two to be had from all of those. Today, folks, for the rest of your life, please make every single connection that you have with another human being count. And that will only happen if you make a conscious decision for that to happen. You know, that's what this is all about. So I just want to say thank you. If you do that, you'll be the one that can avoid getting eaten. Bring it back, okay? It's a moral to the story. Thank you.